The US and the EU have run out of items on which they could impose sanctions on Russia. The West's bet on crippling sanctions to checkmate Putin's power appears to be faltering. As we speak, the Russian economy seems to be thriving. It is alive and kicking, despite the envisioned breakdown anticipated by the US. As the conflict in Ukraine stretches into months, the expected economic implosion envisioned by the West remains elusive. Instead of witnessing Putin's downfall, the Kremlin seems to be playing a resilient hand. Moscow is now emerging stronger than ever amidst all the chaos. The sanctions, thought to be the silver bullet, have turned out to be more of a misfire, leaving many Western strategists scratching their heads and wondering if their playbook requires a major rewrite. As the smoke clears, it's becoming apparent that the West's sanctions on Russia are hitting home, and no one feels the squeeze more acutely than Germany. Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, finds itself on the precipice of crisis as the consequences of the sanctions check in through its economy. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, once leading Germany with confidence, is now finding himself in murky waters and, in an unexpected twist, points fingers at President Putin for Germany's mounting woes. Has the cure become worse than the ailment it sought to address? This is a question burdening many in Europe. The sanctions levied on Russian oil and gas are casting a chilling shadow over Europe, directly throttling the continent's access to the affordable energy lifeline that flows from Russia. The repercussions are echoing through the economies of European nations. EU countries now find themselves shackled to the weight of pricey energy alternatives from far-flung corners of the globe. The once dependable and cost-effective Russian energy tap has been abruptly closed. European countries are now at the mercy of more expensive energy sources. As the financial toll mounts, Europe has to face the harsh reality. It has to learn that pursuing geopolitical goals comes at an exorbitant cost. Europe's economy is now strained, and governments are scrambling for an exit strategy from this energy impasse. With everything considered, it wouldn't be inaccurate to assert that America has played a big role in guiding Europe into this situation. It is important to note that there are not many trade relations between Russia and the US. Russia trades more with Europe than it does with the US. For instance, much of the oil and gas produced in Russia ends up in Europe. The rest is shared between China and Turkey. To put it in context, minerals, encompassing oil and gas, make up nearly 45% of all Russian exports. This underscores the intricate economic ties between Russia and Europe, overshadowing the comparatively modest trade connections between Russia and the United States. But here is the twist. The United States, acting as the major advocate for Ukraine's NATO membership, is simultaneously pushing Ukraine to persist in the ongoing conflict. However, for the US to win the war against Russia using Ukraine as a proxy, it must execute its masterstroke: sanctions. But how can you effectively sanction a country that rarely depends on you for anything? Well, the US turned to its allies, especially those in Europe with close ties to Russia. The pressure exerted by the US on Europe and fellow NATO members resulted in a concerted effort to punish Russia with sanctions. But the moment of truth has arrived. The imposed sanctions are backfiring on everyone in Europe. The harsh reality is glaring, evident to every discerning eye in the bloc. The majority of EU countries are starting to feel the pain of cutting ties with Russia. Germany, once an economic powerhouse, is taking the lead in feeling the brunt of the consequences. Now, EU members are not happy. Divisions among European nations are becoming apparent, and alliances are growing stronger among nations that have been resistant for a long time to the US-led attempts to impose economic penalties on Russia. Several European countries, including some NATO members, are devising clever strategies to secure Russian oil through indirect channels. Reports indicate that India is purchasing Russian oil at a more affordable rate, refining it, and then selling it to European nations at a marked-up price. Consequently, European countries are now procuring energy at considerably higher costs compared to direct transactions with Russia. This move, while detrimental to their collective economies, paradoxically aims to keep the US content by outwardly adhering to sanctions on Russia while covertly accessing Russian oil and gas through backdoor routes. At this juncture, the the sanctions on Russia appear to be, at the very least, counterproductive. Meanwhile, Russia and China have solidified a comprehensive partnership with no limits. China continues to buy Russian oil and gas. At the same time, the BRICS economic bloc is said to be pursuing a strategy to enhance the use of local currencies for trade amongst them, steering away from reliance on the US dollar. And to make the situation even more difficult for Europe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has boldly insisted that Russian oil will exclusively be traded in rubles, yuan, or gold. No more Uncle Sam's paper. The plot thickens for Ukraine and Europe as the US throws a curveball by refusing to slap sanctions on Russia's uranium, a vital component crucial for fueling American power plants. The US has also taken advantage of the energy crisis in Europe. America is now providing oil and gas to the continent at a premium. Quite a shocker. But taking a closer look at Europe today reveals something surprising. The EU has begun easing some stringent sanctions on Russia, particularly concerning LNG and oil. For instance, the proposal to lower the $60 per barrel oil price cap has been put on the back burner. Instead, leaders are choosing to impose sanctions on relatively insignificant items like precious stones, pig iron, and copper, which make minimal contributions to Russia's GDP. Currently, Russian oil is being sold well above the established cap of $60. And the surprises go even deeper. Today, Russia is capitalizing on aging tankers that are willing to transport its fuel globally, in violation of the bans. The ships lack proper maintenance or insurance and often switch off their transponders to obscure the origin of their fuel, or sometimes engage in ship-to-ship transfers to confuse distant observers. There is a huge demand for oil worldwide, meaning oil traders are more than willing to take a risk on their cargo, with enforcement of the rules being only limited. As I have pointed out earlier, visible cracks are emerging within the EU. Several nations in Europe are already taking a stand, much to the dismay of America and to the detriment of the West's efforts to win the war in Ukraine. Among such nations are Hungary and Turkey. Hungary has shocked its members and observers alike with a bold and controversial stance amidst the Russia-Ukraine war. Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán and senior officials have not only called for providing security guarantees to Russia, but have vehemently opposed Ukraine's NATO accession. Adding to the drama, Hungary consistently rejects the idea of imposing sanctions on Russian oil, opting to maintain a steady stream of LNG and oil purchases directly from Russia. Not stopping there, Budapest is even intensifying its Russian gas purchases in anticipation of the upcoming winter. Turkey, on its part, has taken a divergent path within the NATO alliance by abstaining from imposing sanctions on Moscow. Instead of punitive measures, Turkey has undertaken a unique diplomatic approach, hosting a series of peace talks that, unfortunately, yielded little success. Intriguingly, Turkey has not only refrained from aligning with the sanctions imposed by some NATO members, but has also sought to strengthen economic ties with both Moscow and Ukraine. And what has even come as a surprise to many keenly observing the tussle between Russia and America is the unabated surge in Russian liquefied natural gas imports by several EU countries. In a jaw-dropping revelation, Spain and Belgium have escalated their imports by an astonishing 50% in 2023 alone. All of this goes to show that Putin remains unfazed by American sanctions. Putin is today well equipped with substantial funds to arm and compensate his troops in Ukraine. It's common knowledge that this financial reservoir originates from the lucrative sale of energy to Europe. To this end, Putin's position on the Black Sea has not wavered. The president insists that Ukraine will not be granted access to the Black Sea until an agreement ensuring the removal of hindrances to Russian exports of food and fertilizer has been fulfilled. It is clear now who still holds the upper hand in this ongoing standoff. Americans and the EU find themselves in a dilemma. However, one thing is certain: to bring Putin to his knees, the focus must be on his Achilles heel, oil. Yet imposing sanctions on oil is a double-edged sword, inflicting harm on Moscow while simultaneously damaging the European economy. Europe has reached the limits of its actions without risking self-inflicted harm. Now the question is, will Europe stop listening to America?